Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Review today. We're going to do a review of a game that has been in the hopper and in my house for several weeks. It is... Nope, that's not right. Lord of the Rings, Journeys in Middle-earth. That's right, this is a game that's meant to be an exploration adventure game for 1 to 5 players that takes place in the world of J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth. It is similar to some of the previous app-driven games that Final Fantasy Games puts out. Mansions of Madness for one, Imperial Assault, Descent. This is their latest evolution of the app, and this is their latest incarnation of a theme for that app-driven gaming line of products that they have. Is it any good? We will find out, but I will warn you that I will not give away, or I'm aiming to try not to give away information because it is campaign-based, and that campaign is not dynamic insofar as the actual major plot lines change. And so I'm going to give a basic overview of sort of the pieces and how it kind of rolls, but away from actually giving away story elements in so far as I can. So that's my warning and caveat. I hope that I manage to not give away too much in the following playthrough, and we'll do that, and then we'll get to my final thoughts. Okay, let's take a look at what you get in the box. Now, I've recreated the vacuum of the box size over here. This is where all the stuff that eventually they'll sell you is. But let's go over and start off with the Learn to Play and Rules reference. Once again, a split manual like they usually do. I've grown quite accustomed to them. I actually think there's a meritable fashion in the way that they handle that, so you can just pop in and play, and if you have a rules question here. So this is what I read before I play, and this is what's at my bedstand when I read at night before I go to sleep. Yes, I'm that weird. Now, what you have with the game is you have the various map tiles, and I'm not going to give them away. I'm just going to leave them stacked here. I actually do it numerically top to bottom because in the application, when it's telling you to add certain pieces, it's real quick to go look them up and stuff. Then you have a bunch of bits and pieces and components. I don't want to give anything away, as I've expressed. These are sort of look-up handy cards. These are titles, certain benefits you'll get in your deck. These are items, weapons, armor, and items. A ton of little chits. You have tokens. Actually, not that many chits, to be honest with you, comparatively speaking, but inspiration tokens are sort of the big thing, and search and threat tokens as well. Also, you have certain states boons that you can obtain that give you a benefit, and don't worry about those. Those are for, yeah, long story. And you have your character. Now, your character starts off with a nominal set of cards, one for each character. So, for example, Gimli, he has a set of cards. Then you take on a role, and he can choose which role. There are certain roles that seem more naturally suited for, say, Gimli than others, but you can mix and match as you wish during the game. They have special bonuses, which I won't give away here, and of course the typical app-driven FFG kind of style of here's your different attributes, and of course fire and 2 different types of damages, of course. And then you have here's some items, like Gimli will start with 2 items, but then he'll have his deck here. I have Gimli and I have Legolas. 2 great tastes that taste great together, and they work well, same kind of thing. Over here we have the damage, the fear and the damage piles. Unlike sort of damage tokens, when you might, in the standard way, you take damage, you take, some sort of token until you get a certain amount of tokens on your character, and then you're dead and life goes sad. Here instead you have these, and some of these are just face down damage, like, oh, I'm just a piece of meat to you. Others, when you flip them over, have special things that they do in addition to or instead of. So you never know when you take damage what kind of damage you're going to take, which can mix the game up quite a bit. Same thing with fear. Fear of the mind, damage of the physical senses. Finally, we have the cast of characters who will go out and thwart you. Now, a lot of these are... I've split them up a little bit. There's not a ton of variety, but that's okay. There's just different kinds of characters. I think these guys are my favorite to look at, my least favorite to be attacked by. And that's really it. All of this is sort of a construction kit, as it were. Oh, wait, no. We've introduced this. We have pieces. Now, what are these pieces for? They look like zoomed-in pieces. Wow, they don't seem to fit. How can we fit that big of a wall on that? Well, we don't. Because we have all these pieces and tokens that map this, which is the battle board. Now, while you have outside missions, okay, not outside missions, but you have sort of journey missions, you also have more zoomed-in tactical missions that take place on these two pizza box sized squares. And so that's what'll happen. You'll be placing, you know, like walls and whatever and moving around. So this will give you a chance almost for that little XCOM tactical like idea of the game. That is something that is new that I haven't seen in the other app driven games that Fantasy Flight affords us. And finally, the big thing, all this is just members of the band to get us to what really matters, which is the app, which drives it all. Once again, I'm not going to give away spoilers other than to say that you will use this app and drive the game forward by following the special prompts, etc. There's a couple online tutorials out there that explain, playthroughs, not really tutorials, that play through what it is that you're going to do in the first couple missions or first missions, and those are really the best thing to check out because, once again, I want to remain spoiler free. I am going to give you a little idea of what will happen, and I'll do that now. So I'm doing a fictitious scenario here because I'm not going to give any of the plot away. First off, when a game starts, you will place some tiles down according to what the instruction manual says. Here, we're on our way to find the magic phlegm staff of King Aardvark. Yes, that's what we're doing. And of course, bad things are going to happen to us on the way. Generally speaking, it will tell you, the app will tell you where to put your units to start with. They all start together. And then they'll tell you some tiles to put out and exploration tokens. Now, exploration tokens, as they go on certain things, will kind of like activate that tile in certain ways. For example, the app will say, hey, place these all out. Now you go. The first phase you have is a scout phase. Now, a scout phase is interesting. Usually you put your equipment out, and I won't give away the equipment. Let's pretend the equipment wasn't there. And you'll take a couple cards off the top of the deck called scouting. This is what's intriguing. This is probably the most intriguing part that I think to remove diceless play, really, is you shuffle these, and then you flip two over and scout. Now, the way that the cards go is that you will have at the top success or possible success. So, for example, here you've got these, man, that's blurry. These orange dots are success. So when it's time to do a test, you're going to flip a certain amount of cards over based on usually your attribute, and you'll do a test. And if these are instant successes, the orange, the bluish, or the silver leaf ones, are potential successes if you want to use an inspiration token. And so what you do when you scout is you get to take, say, 2 of these down. You can play one of them up to 4 and use their special ability or lay it aside here to prepare it on your... And then the other one you can either place back on top if you think it's going to, if you want to, or place it on the bottom. So in my case, I'm giving up a success here to place this card. Now that's not going to be available to me when I do tests, but maybe I like the special ability enough that its powerful effects are overwhelming and I must use it in a given situation. And then of course, equipment-wise, he has a battle axe, which means if he gets a certain amount of hits, he does a certain amount of damage because he's Gimli. Gimli rocks. And that's really what's going to, that's kind of how it's going to work, is you're going to scout and you're going to place cards and prepare cards for these characters. The next step you're going to do then is you get 2 actions. Those actions can be moving, interacting. For example, hey, the text on the app will say, oh, not Steam. The text on the app will say, hey, I go here and I explore. So the first thing you do, exploring doesn't an action. You just if you go into a tile for the first time, you get it and it turns into an inspiration token. And that's what you can use. For example, when you saw that I came up with certain cards that had that maple leaf kind of thing. There, if you want to expend a token, that can be a success. And so you get to choose to expend tokens for success rather, as well as use the built-in success orange tokens, symbols on the top of your cards. So say you explore here and you find out that the phlegm scepter is a lie, and you must go find some other thing that involves gelatinous warfare. And so it will do something. Sometimes these tokens will reveal monsters, sometimes they'll reveal tests. And tests, you'll use your attributes and say, oh, well, if my test is 4, I flip 4 cards and see how many successes I get from the 4 cards I flip. This is the most basic example because I'm trying not to give anything away. As time goes on, this map will fill out. For example, you'll go here and there'll be a token here and you'll flip it over, or it'll say, you'll resolve it and it'll add some creatures and like, oh, look, there's this. The Wonder Twins are back and their powers are not yet activated and stuff. So all of this will go on and you do your basic adventuring all through using these generic tokens, this Explore to Interact token and the Threat tokens. And obviously there's always some sort of high-level premise that you're trying to achieve in the missions. When that happens, and you're done with your turn, when you've gone along and you've done your thing and taken your 2 turns and helped each other out and all that, you will then go into the shadow phase. Shadow phase can do things like put creatures on a map to go after you. It can try and just attack you out of nowhere and just come up with something like, hey, Legolas blew his nose and the trees around him got mad and hit him for 3 physical damage. Things like that. Most of the time it seems like they're creatures, but during the shadow phase, if there are creatures on the board, they will either move to attack if they're in range, or if they're not in range, it usually has them move a little farther to get close to being at their range. Fairly simple stuff, but it does the job. And that's kind of the idea of what you're going to do with this game. Once again, it is not a full playthrough I'm trying to do here because I wish not to give any spoiler away. I'm just showing you the idea of what you're going to play. People who are interested in that will already kind of hopefully have seen a couple of the playthroughs. With that, though, that simple explanation, let's get to my thoughts on what I think. Wow, that was redundant. Well, on my thoughts on Journeys in Middle-earth and how I think it stacks up against some of the other games I played in the same genre or venue. Alright, let's give a thought to our final thoughts on what I thought was thoughtful about Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth. Now, I hesitated with this review because in general, I don't do negative reviews. I just don't see a need. I've done them historically in the past for when I was a video game reviewer, but it's not my thing anymore. There's plenty of ways to critique a game without my needing to join the fray. So because this wasn't, there's 2 reasons why I generally do a review then, and they come down to this. Either I'm really excited about a title and I just want to share it with people in the hopes that they find it exciting too, and that's like 90% of the reason why I do them. The other one is that I see great potential, or I see things, there's something in that game, something that despite all the reasons I might not find it thrilling, still leads me to believe that there's merit and value, even if not for me long term, for others as well. There's plenty of stinkers in my collection, and I don't review them. They just don't. I'll always answer any questions if someone has a direct question. I'm not afraid. I don't try to just find the good in every game, but I just don't. For this particular channel, I just like to focus on the positive elements of games that I enjoy. So we will start off with this, but as a caveat, this isn't something that's going to be just as glowing as you might have heard from other games that I've done. But there's a reason why that I think might mitigate some of my disappointment. First off, this is a polished experience straight off of the assembly line of FFG's typical rote offerings. It checks off all the tick marks that FFG games do that generally meet the expectations of the audience that kind of already knows what these app-driven adventure games are about. It promises lots of financial opportunities to take the game further and further over time because of the app-driven nature and because FFG just naturally takes things and expands them over time. Don't have a problem with it. the why don't I like it? Why didn't I like Journeys of it very much? I think part of it, and this is the crux, is it's an exercise in comparisons that left Journeys in Middle-earth unnoteworthy for me in many respects. This is my background. I have played Middle-earth Quest, which I found to be phenomenal. War of the Ring, phenomenal. Battle of the Five Armies, phenomenal. Lord of the Rings Confrontation, phenomenal. Lord of the Rings Living Card Game, hated it for a year and a half, and then loved it ever since. I can be wrong. Hunt for the Ring, and then take away the Lord of the Rings parts, and I played games like Gloomhaven 10 out of 10, Legends of Andor, Runebound 3rd edition, Space Cadets, Sword and Sorcery, Massive Darkness, and then as far as apps go, Mansions of Madness, XCOM, Descent, Imperial Assault. And the realization I came to is because I was exposed to all those things and because of my enjoyment factor, that I realized that as far as Journeys in Middle-earth goes, anything it can do, they can do better, for the most part, with exception. Let's start with components. The components are solid. They're so standard FFG that you'll be right at home with anything if you've ever played a Fantasy Flight game of this type before. I mean, the vacuous box just screams cliffhanger, count on more coming. There is one thing that component-wise, that's squint level 5 for my aging eyes to look at some of the cards because of the size, but that's a nominal complaint. There is a trade-off in that they use kind of generic reusable pieces that make you have to craft the customized story in your mind. By that I mean there's tokens on the board that are the same, and they'll map to some text that displays or something that'll happen. This is not the same experience that I would get if I'm, say, in War of the Rings and I'm moving orcs and I'm feeling that visceral feel of creative, like, battles moving forward. There's no distinctions on the board that you'll see for me that says, hey, oh, there's the lavender chalice. It will give me +2 to curtain hanging skill. Let's go grab that. It's just, it's there. It does the job in a generic fashion, and that's that. The map tiles themselves are irregular, and they form a rather sort of like a world map. That's far and away better than squares of terrain. The irregular tiles kind of make the map seem more adventurous and a little less claustrophobic than, say, Mansions of Madness, which is a different scope entirely. The battle map I thought was so stupid and simple because it's basically 2 cardboard pizza box bottoms with some rectangular rings, and I expected it to be the feeblest part of the experience. I was wrong, and we'll get into that later. Map detail is generic. There's no noteworthy iconic locales, no sense of, hey, there's Lothlorien, nothing like that. It's in the movies or the books, the places are described with such an expectation that they evoke awe in my mind. Here it's just another kind of like irrelevant spinning crystal in the kaleidoscope of insignificant terrain. Now, the maps have 2 differentiations. The map tile, they do 2 things. They're in darkness or they're not. Other than that, logically, there's not a lot else to them. So, beyond that, they're just buckets for movement. All they boil down to is distance. Is this space in away from those irregular or not? It could have been a red and white checkerboard tablecloth for the same impact. And that was interesting to me because Lord of the Rings, the movies and the books are so rich in the venue that they described. The map portion was, for me, kind of a sizable letdown. As a counterpoint, though, the game is not necessarily about the tiles, and they do serve enough artistic function to support the feeling of adventure without really bogging down into the gameplay thing. I understand they didn't want this to be a territory-crawling game. It's not a strategy game, but I have seen recently Escape Plan, Lord of the Rings Confrontation, and other games where just even the basic territorial impact can have a huge value on the impression of the game and the feeling of adventure. Yeah, I mean, in this case, certain tiles, A or B, whatever, it just doesn't in the end matter. Is it in darkness or it is not? So that wasn't great. Characters-wise, now characters brings a glimmer of possibility. I was like, characters, yeah. I mean, it's in some kind of very superficial homage to Gloomhaven. You have deck control, ordering of your deck. I mean, there's very, very loose parallels there, so don't read too much into it. It's cleverly subtle in the way that you can call your deck with the sort of the preparation system. The initial upgrades on those cards seem nominal, and at first I felt they were too slow, but over time I felt that no, they actually did a good job of expressing the upgrades value vividly as the campaign continues. The bizarre thing is skipping the first upgrades, because I honestly felt like I didn't want to upgrade the little upgrades, because they almost were as detrimental as helpful, in that those cards, they clog up your deck of success icons, and they're very situational. It's what it is. It's just the way the game is. I mean, there's no power upgrades. It's not like Mage Knight, when I get this card, in it goes, and it's going to do some powerful thing right here and now, like Aeon's End, is that when you get it, like, yes, I'm ready, I buy a card and I'm using it, yeah. The equipment cards, straightforward. Again, very general purpose updates to the existing equipment. It's not, transcendently clever or anything, but it's equipment. So yeah. Now the app is, I'm not app adverse at all. Like I'm no problem with using the app or using apps in a game. I've found a lot of games that I think have done a phenomenal job. It's solaced. It's polished. Polished and solished. It's solid, polished, best app they've done yet. It's got very good clarity of instruction, no questions left behind as far as setting up or going through the game. It's very subdued. It feels very business casual. You're immediately stifled with Elvenator music, to the point that I just turned it off and just put on some Lord of the Rings tunes. Not a bunch of pizzazz, but just doing its job and doing its job well. Now let's get to the story. It tells a story, but it's not necessarily a bold story to me. I honestly, playing the game, didn't feel much concern about the spoilers, because frankly, I don't remember much about it anyway. It was okay. I mean, to me, it felt a little pedestrian, which was kind of unmemorable in contrast to, say, the rich storytelling I've experienced with other contemporary titles. Once again, that's the kicker here. Generic, I mean, Gloomhaven, for instance. I will never forget J.R.R. I will never forget that trail and all of the hundreds of hours I've spent, doing that. I mean, I will never forget that. This is, it's got it's got some storylines, and they're clever. They grow. It's it's okay. The places on the map are like, yeah, they're there. It's okay. It's okay. It's not bad in the way that cream of wheat isn't a bad breakfast choice. But I don't lie awake recounting my breakfast sojourns into the swamp of wheat cream. So it is what it is. I could see them hopefully doing more extensive things in further campaign missions or expansions than I felt like this had. Not bad, just nothing that left me in awe. Not every game does. Now combat is in some ways generic. The enemies are generic. They're there. They're there's little things. They're, other than plastic, there's not a ton of variety about them. Everything kind of maps down to this much health with shield, which is health. A few basic things like adds more damage, does more damage. This is another thing where I have to compare against Gloomhaven, because Gloomhaven was so unique with all the creatures. I can remember in my mind which creatures, some of the things they did, the ways that they uniquely attacked or messed with you. In Middle-earth Quest, the same. Like Lord of the Rings living card game, the same. Here, not so much. It just felt sort of conveyor belt. Sorry, it just did. Attributes and tests, those could have been a crapshoot, but because you get to configure your deck ahead of time, you can limit the crapshootness and be able to kind of do some true strategizing on how you're going to approach a combat. And I thought that was nice. Now, gameplay, the diceless existence is a boon. The menu card management, like I've said, is great. It's fueled by, the funny thing about inspiration tokens is that they're not very inspiring. They're just kind of like progress fuel or success fuel. Go to the map tile, get the fuel, trigger the stuff, and then the inspiration tokens, they feed the system to help you advance. And, they do the job. The battle map, I like the battle map with the terrain. Actually started to, I really thought that was going to be the weak spot, and it turned out to be one of my favorite spots. When you go into a battle map and you're zoomed in, that actually to me had the more interesting tales to regale and the more interesting things to do than the journeys. So now value wise, right now I paid $75 for Journeys in Middle Earth. In contrast, I paid $90 for Gloomhaven because I got a sweet deal. Gloomhaven is probably 10 times the value as far as what it provides for my enjoyment. I mean, I have 2 copies of it too because I have 2 parties, and it's just I've imbued it. A Runebound was $40. To me, it's like 2 or 3 times the value out of the box of the experience of adventuring. So it's hard for me to say that I got great value out of this yet. Yeah. So in summary, I guess to wrap it up, because this has taken a while. Every time I think that this game falls short, it does something to find redeeming points to it. And every time I think it's turning the corner, it takes its foot off the gas. And it's probably the safest journey I've ever had in Middle-earth of all the games that I play. And again, remember, this is an exercise in contrasts. When you're surrounded by a bunch of great games, or games that you really love, and you play this and it's kind of subdued, my review is going to be slanted over someone who just is like, I'm just playing something like this for the first time, and for that, it's absolutely enjoyable, absolutely worth the money. I've had someone, when I was talking about it, say, well, remember, this is for the books, not the movies, so you just want action and stuff. But honestly, and there might be a point to that, where I feel like, action up, although I didn't. The more I played it, the more I felt okay about it. But the action and the pricing and the pacing, they should match the book expectations too. I mean, I read the books again. It isn't the kind of action pacing I seek, but it starts to get you immersed in the Lord of the Rings universe. It's like they went partly up the mountain of doom, and then the Fellowship of Interesting Endeavors is disbanded a little bit. And that's unfair. I mean, it's unfair to ask them to just write token level stuff, but I did hope for a little more. Again, I've been blessed with tons of recent story adventures. Gloomhaven is the grail for me. Its story, its character development, it's a pinnacle that I have yet to be equaled personally. And while Journeys in Middle-earth is nowhere near there, how about comparing it to other games? Mansions of Madness, I think Mansions of Madness I thought was more compelling and left me with a better feeling of adventure. Space Cadets away missions, way better. Fallout, even, while not a campaign, kind of really fit me into the world better than I thought this did. I mean, this for how good it is, and it's a good game, could have been so much more. But it's Lord of the Rings, which means I'm always going to keep it. I'm always going to give it more than its fair shot. I'm going to try and find a way to enjoy it if I can. It definitely improves on some aspects of previous Aftermath games from FFG. It does have familiar characters, and I like the familiar characters, and I think they're fairly well represented. So is it good enough if you either don't like the aforementioned, or you're not bothered that this is a simplistic distillation of great ideas into a good game? Yeah, I would say. I mean, it's approachable. It's way more easy to introduce to people than Gloomhaven. That alone is probably worth the value for people who just want to just enjoy the ride. I guess let me put it this way. Of all of the Lord of the Rings games I own, it's definitely in the top 5 games that I consider adding to the bottom of my top 20 Lord of the Rings games that I own. I know half of it half as well as I liked, and I liked half of it half as well as it probably deserves. So there you go. I hope I wasn't too negative. I do think that there's a place for this game, and I do hope people who do enjoy it find great fun in it. And I think that I will, I'm into it now, so I expect expansions on the way will probably help fill in some of the story, and maybe we'll find that this, in the end, is a road that does go on and gets better as it does. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.